Good morning, all. And thanks for joining us today on the latest of our Creating Tomorrow series of ADAPT webinars. So for good order, I'm your MC, and my name is Edmund O'Connor, and I look after the industry engagements with the ADAPT Centre, which is Ireland's Science Foundation of Ireland Research Centre. And we're working in the area of AI, digital content technologies. And we have over 300 researchers from across 8 universities in Ireland, working really right across multiple domains. So when I talk about technologies, we're working and including technologies, including personalization right across natural language processing, data analytics, machine translation, as well as setting the standards for data governance, privacy, and ethics for digital content. Now, this is the fourth and the latest of the ADAPT webinars. And over the last number of months, we've been very busy discussing a whole host of topics, ranging from AI and machine learning, data governance, e-health, and our rich startup ecosystem here at the ADAPT Centre. And you'll find those webinars on our website, adaptcentre.ie. But today, it's all about FinTech, and that's a key and fundamental research focus for the ADAPT. So for sure, the pandemic has changed the way we work, and we're all relying more on technology and digital tools across all aspects of our lives. Also true for financial institutions, where certainly the pace of innovation has accelerated, with institutions looking to implement open, fully integrated and cloud-based platforms to power the user experience, which will hopefully deliver a much more personalized advice and experience for their clients. And financial institutions are certainly looking to, new revenue models, accelerating roadmaps to digitize experiences, managing risk, of course, and regulation, while delivering more with less is certainly demanded. And some of those trends are certainly something we're seeing at the ADAPT Centre. And for sure, AI and machine learning is very much instrumental in transforming those services and products, from the collection, aggregation, and resulting insights from data to providing invaluable information on market demand and customer preferences, right through to workflow automation. And of course, many layers within that, you have companies that are working on and trying to make sense of the vast amounts of data. Looking at the quality of the data is important, creating data standards. And of course, the very topic in itself, not only within FinTech, but right across the spectrum, across all the domains, carries inherent privacy, security, and ethical risks that can bring legal and regulatory scrutiny to business practices. Fortunately, we have 3 excellent speakers with a great depth and breadth across some of these topics. So, and I'm really looking forward to listening to them to present. The format of today is quite straightforward. They'll have 10 minutes or so and give us some of their thoughts on Ireland's, ranging from Ireland's FinTech ecosystem through to challenges and opportunities on bringing innovative ideas to market and examples of industry research use cases. And we'll then have about 10 minutes or so Q&A session, and then just a final wrap up. But we're on a promise that we'll keep this as close as possible to the 45, 50 minutes, well under the hour, and have you back at your desk in no time. If you have any questions as you listen to the presenters, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and cover as many as possible. With that, I'm delighted this morning to welcome our 3 great panelists who will discuss some of these topics. And just to give you a quick intro from speaking to them earlier in the week, let me just call out, we have Nicola Stokes, who is a senior technologist at the IDA and responsible for identifying FDI, financial technology investment opportunities. And speaking to Nicola, she has some really considered views on Ireland's financial technology value proposition, and she will give you some insights on Ireland's competitive FinTech ecosystem. And Nicola has over 15 years experience managing AI-related RDI projects in diverse domains such as life sciences, health informatics, smart cities, and media analytics. And alongside Nicola, virtually at least, it will be Ray Richardson, who's the global head of advanced analytics for Deutsche Bank and the head of Deutsche Data Lab. Now, speaking to Ray earlier in the week, he's very much sort of helping to drive the adoption of machine learning and advanced analytics across the organization. And is very much focused on, I suppose, standardizing approaches to analytic solutions and ensuring that the respective policies and controls that are embedded within the organization are fair and ethical. And then to our own Dr. Robert Ross, who's working alongside me within the ADAPT Centre. Robert is a senior lecturer at Technological University Dublin, where he's a director of the Applied Intelligence Research Centre. And Robert is a senior investigator in the ADAPT Centre, where his core research area is in the field of dialogue and conversational agents. And Robert has also worked extensively in applied machine learning in the areas ranging from fintech to precision agriculture across a lot of our industry research collaboration projects. So welcome, folks. I'm delighted that you could join us today, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your presentations. So with that, let's grab a coffee, guys, and let's kick off. Firstly, I'd like to pass you over to Nicola, if I may. Nicola? Hopefully you should have access to present. You're on mute there, Nicola, I think.
Thanks, Edmund, for that great introduction. I'm delighted to be here today with this exciting panel. What I'd like to do is just give you a quick overview of IDA Ireland, who we are and what we do. And then I'm going to give you a quick primer on the international financial services sector in Ireland and why companies invest here and what's unique about our ecosystem. And finally, then I just want to talk a little bit about what we are seeing in the ground in terms of technology opportunities in financial services. So could you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So IDA Ireland is the government agency responsible for attracting foreign direct investment into Ireland. We target foreign-owned companies who are looking at international expansion, and we work with them to attract them to Ireland. So in parallel to that, we also have our existing clients, and we are helping them to expand and develop their mandates within Ireland. So IDA works with about 1,600 foreign-owned companies at present, and we support about 257,000 jobs in target industries like financial services, biopharma, medtech, engineering, technology, and business services as well. And our core focus is on attracting long-term sustainable jobs and employment, and then spreading that throughout the country. So what we do is we offer a comprehensive pro bono support for our client companies, and we partner with them really on their investment journey. And we have about 20 international offices worldwide, and then a number of regional offices within Ireland as well. So foreign direct investment, as many of you will know, is a critical element of Ireland's industrial development policy. Along with that, the second pillar is supporting Indigenous companies to grow and trade internationally, and that's the mandate of our sister agency, Enterprise Ireland. And then the third pillar of that industrial policy is investing in innovation and R&D, and the ADAPT Centre is a superb example of academic funding and support in that area. And from our perspective in IDA, we see that all three of these pillars are very much interlinked and are really crucial and critical to our success. Next slide. So Ireland, as many of you know, is a key financial hub in Europe. It's succeeded, or we have succeeded in building a very successful sector over the past 40 years in this space. And currently we have about 430 firms, both multinational and Indigenous, that employ about 48,000 people in the sector. And they work in the likes of banking and payments and funds and insurance and reinsurance, investment and asset management, aircraft leasing, and increasingly in recent years in the area of fintech or financial technology. And this sector, it makes a significant contribution to the overall economy of around 11 billion in exports and about 2 billion in tax receipts, representing about 23% of overall corporation tax in Ireland. And within IDA, about 20% of the annual investments now won by IDA is actually in financial services. So it's a massive growth area for us. And it has thankfully demonstrated significant resilience in the current challenging climate. The financial services sector has a significant presence across the country. If you go on to the next slide, please. What this slide shows is that it really is a national industry. About 30% of the financial services jobs in Ireland are actually outside of Dublin, and about 80% of our top 10 companies would have regional offices outside of the capital. So next slide, please. So there's a number of factors and factors that influence overseas investors when they're making a decision about whether or not to come to Ireland. Ireland is actually a very competitive location from a company perspective. We have access to the EU market. We've highly skilled and well-educated labour market, underpinned by favourable demographics. We have a very young population. We have an excellent track record in terms of attracting FDI to the shores. We have relationships with some clients, that would be nearly 70 years old at this stage. We also operate a very competitive operating environment, such as our tax rate, our tax regime, including like R&D tax credits and the R&D grant support mechanisms that the government have in place as well to incentivize companies to build out here. We also have a strong and independent regulator who's ready to engage with clients through mechanisms like their new innovation hub. And we also have a world-class and highly collaborative R&D ecosystem. And ADAPT is a great exemplar of that. And Ireland has been, I suppose, fortuitous in its investment in terms of research, academic research, and particularly in the area of artificial intelligence, which it has supported over the last 20 years or so. And we're now at a point where we have these research centres of scale, which ADAPT is, and really these research centres are the talent and innovation engines for Ireland, and our client base are using them extensively to tap into talent, both talent and for opportunities in terms of collaborative research. So about 250 companies, Irish-based companies, are engaging with research centres like ADAPT to date. And many of them, like Deutsche Bank, who you'll hear from later on, have a long-standing relationship with the centres. Next slide, please. So one of the main reasons why foreign direct investment sectors in Ireland perform so well is the realisation by the ecosystem that everybody needs to work together. So when IDA is successful in attracting investment, it's actually a collaborative endeavor with other people in the ecosystem. So that means the companies that we would already have here, both foreign and domestic. The university sector is so important, and the various educational providers. Then the other government agencies, we work closely with them, like Science Foundation Ireland and Enterprise Ireland. And then there are other key stakeholders like the American Chamber of Commerce and the local county councils and the various financial services clusters that have popped up around the country as well are an important element of that ecosystem. And the ecosystem is, as I said, it's really important. It's key really to securing investment. And our investors, they seek really to understand the ecosystem here and how they can take advantage of it. And that growth and impact of those public-private collaborations, that has the full support of the government. And you can see that in the likes of the Ireland for Finance strategy that the government launched 2 years ago. And a key pillar of that strategy actually is technology and innovation. And one of Ireland's unique strengths is its deep talent pools in both financial services and the pure play tech industry. If you go on to the next slide, I can demonstrate that. So yeah, in this slide, what I'm trying to show is that, over the past 30 years or so, we've built a very competitive global technology hub here. We've attracted all of the big internet and social media companies, for example, like Dropbox and Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, Amazon. So they've joined us in the last 10 or 15 years. But even before that, we had all of the traditional long-established tech companies here as well. IBM joined us in the 1950s, Apple in the 1980s. So as this slide shows, we're now at this point where the financial services companies are perfectly positioned to take advantage of this deep technology talent pool. And this is really at the forefront of their mind as they look to accelerate digital transformation within their organizations. And what we also see is this wonderful kind of cross-pollination across the two industries as well. And this is really putting Ireland at the forefront of the financial services technology revolution. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to finish up with some examples of some of the key R&D technology projects that are under development in Ireland. So financial services companies, really across our portfolio are exploiting these emerging technologies on the left-hand side. And they are AI, blockchain, data science, IoT. We're even having conversations about quantum computing. And these technologies, what they do is they provide an automatic means of improving operational efficiencies in the front, middle, and back office processes through, for example, enhancing customer engagement through, as it says here, chatbots and personalized offerings. And then on the other side, these techniques or these underlying technologies are helping companies to tackle the challenges arising from increased regulation and compliance, which is a massive cost within the financial services system. So for example, if we just take AI, in the global banking arena, it's estimated that AI could deliver up to $1 trillion worth of additional value each year for companies that employ it. So the speakers that will follow me will provide their perspectives on what are those challenges in rolling out these emerging technologies like AI, and also give you some insight into how academia can help with solutions in this area. One of the challenges that client companies are grappling with at the moment that we see is, implementation around the forthcoming EU AI regulation. And what this involves is really bridging that gap between policy, all of these policy documents that are out there on trustworthy AI and AI ethics, and they're trying to figure out how to actually implement this in practice. And earlier this year, Ireland launched its national AI strategy, where it identified trustworthy AI as a niche area that Ireland has demonstrated significant leadership in. So this is both from the academic side with expertise in the likes of explainable AI and data governance, but also on the depth of the AI expertise in this area in industry as well. And indeed, it would be my belief that the Irish financial services sector is at the forefront really of this expertise and can provide particular leadership in this area, given its wealth of expertise in terms of building out AI solutions within a highly regulated environment. So final slide, please. So in the presentation, I've given you an overview of the financial services ecosystem in Ireland. I've tried to point out some of the reasons why we have earned a reputation as a global hub for both international financial services and technology. And threaded through that then, I've also highlighted one of the unique aspects of the ecosystem, which is really Ireland's world-class academic research centre, with whom a lot of our IDA clients are collaborating with in order to tap into talent and as I said before, tap into research collaborations with the likes of the ADAPT Centre. So I'll hand you back now to Edmund.
That's great, Nicola. Listen, thanks for that. There's a lot there in terms of picking up on some of those points, which we'll later on. But for sure, one can see by looking at some of your slides that over the last 40 years, Ireland, and to be commended, the IDA has earned a really successful track record for international financial services, and as you say, hosting over 430 plus financial services companies in Ireland, but actually, which is a real testament to that sort of, I suppose, cornerstone of that policy is the collaborative process within the ecosystem, particularly when you talk about 430 plus companies based in Ireland and 250 of those companies engaged in research centres. So it just shows a testament to that collaboration does work and it is effective. So speaking of which, to a company that is within that ecosystem is Deutsche Bank. And with that, to pick up the thread of that conversation, Ray, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Edmund. Okay, so I'm coming to you from Deutsche Bank, and I had the Center of Excellence for Data Science and AI ML at Deutsche Bank. I suppose I should say a little bit about the center, our group. So we're about 50 people in Ireland, and we've got small footprints in London, in Frankfurt, in Pune, and in Cary. One of the things, actually, just following on what Nicola had said, we started our journey in Dublin, actually, in terms of deciding that we'd actually, hire people here in Dublin. And right now we have, I think we've got about 23 PhDs in the team. So it really is a team of deep subject matter experts. And this is where it started. It started in Dublin. We had some academic collaborations with ADAPT and with Insight and with some other research organizations in Dublin. And over the last, let's say, 3-4 years, we began to build out, as I say, the footprint around the world. One of the things that I've found, actually, is that it's much more difficult to hire abroad and to retain talent. So one of the things that certainly was a learning for us, for Deutsche Bank, was that Dublin is a good source of talent, and it's a good source of collaboration as well. Now, I've only got 2 slides, but what I'm trying to do is actually just give you a sense of, in the first slide, a sense of the work that we're doing, and in the second slide, a sense of the challenges that we come across in the work that we do. I don't know who has the slides, actually. If we could bring them up, I can't share them from my side. Does Olivia have this? Oh, very good. Perfect. Okay, so within DB, so as I say, there's obviously lots of data science happens across the organization. It's a really, really big organization. We've got 100,000 people. We've got pockets of data science in all of the business lines. But again, this team are, let's say, the center of gravity for AI, ML across the organization. We sit within what's known as the Cloud Strategy and Innovation team. So this is a board level division within Deutsche Bank, which again speaks to the importance of the work that we do. In terms of the type of work we do, we operate this funnel. So everything goes through a funnel. We start with the pioneer phase, where ideas come in. And really anything is an idea. We try to capture ideas on a page. During the pioneer phase, what we do is we try to bear down on the idea in terms of what's the value proposition. One of the important things for us is that, are we surely, okay, so we're generating revenue, reducing risk, or reducing cost, but at what scale? Is it 100,000? Is it 1 million? Is it 10 million? This is really, really important. In the pioneer phase as well, we try to have a look to see what level of support the idea has within the organization, because again, these things tend to be a journey. And as you move through the pioneer into the prove and the professionalize, one of the things you want to know is that you've got sponsorship high enough in the organization to make this work. Okay. And the very last thing we do in the pioneer phase is we have a look to see, at a very high level, whether it's data and technology feasible. Okay. And if it is, then we move into the prove phase. The prove phase is where we build a POC, we build our MVP. So, let's say the idea was to build a machine learning model to predict settlements failure. We'll actually do that. We will build a model to see, can the data support this sort of predictive model? The other thing we do in the prove phase is we bear down on the business case, basically. So if somebody tells us in the pioneer phase that, yeah, you know what, if you can reduce the number of false positives by 50%, that means we can redeploy 400 financial crime investigators, and we'll say, great. And we'll go then and we'll have a look and see, in fact, are there 400 financial crime investigators in that particular division doing false positive alerts, and handling false positive alerts. Similarly, if it's on the client side, if we're looking to generate revenue, one of the things we'll do during the proof phase is we'll go and talk to clients and see, does this idea have the prospect of generating this amount of revenue? And the last step then is professionalize, and that's where, and it's not a short step, that's where you take whatever you've MVP'd or POC'd, and you try to embed it in the business, put it onto a production footing, and get the business to make use of the analytics. Now, we've done lots of different projects. You see, this is actually just a snapshot of the current book of work. So you can see that there's a lot of things happening. A lot of our work started in the Protect the Bank area. So really looking at surveillance in particular. So, can we build a behavioral analytics model that can detect suspicious client trader behavior? Can we build models to reduce the number of false positives that our transaction monitoring systems throw up every day? Those sort of solutions tended to be what we did at the beginning, and they still are an important part of the work that we do. But since then, we began to move out more into what would be, let's say, revenue generating type analytics. So we've had some really good successes in projects like liquidity optimization, or next best action for relationship managers. Or we actually had a really interesting one there quite recently, whereby we looked at portfolio managers, and we looked at their investment decisions over a period of time, and we tried to classify them as being, are they people who hang on to stock for too long? Do they sell them too quickly? These types of things. And what we found was that there's actually, there's a number of different classic personas, so to speak, in terms of investment managers. And if you can actually make people aware of their unconscious bias in terms of the investment decisions, it really does drive performance. So again, that's been a very successful rollout. What you see at the bottom, actually, which is kind of interesting, is that we've just signed at the beginning of the year a strategic partnership with Google. So we're beginning to move to cloud. So coming off our on-prem technology and moving to cloud. And that's really been transformative for us, both in terms of, the amount of, well, actually, the primary thing is the fact that we can work with Google's native AI and ML services, which are really a world above what we can do on-prem. And we've done lots and lots of projects. It's really in the proof phase at the moment around technologies like Google Knowledge Graph, Doc AI, DLP, these types of services. And what we found actually is that it allows us to move faster, which honestly, this is one of the main focus areas for us right now, how we can expedite the time to market for analytics. So if we go to the next slide, actually, we talk a little bit about that. And what this really tries to draw out is what a typical project looks like. Now, I'd like to be able to say that most of our projects we can complete in 3 or 4 months, but the reality is most of our projects take 8 or 9 months. Okay, so we've got pain points across each of the phases of our projects, right from data discovery through to putting systems into production. I might just talk about some of these. I think I have a minute or two. Yeah. So data discovery. You might think it should be easy to discover your data, but in an organization like Deutsche Bank, and in fact in most large organizations, the data landscape is extraordinarily fractured. It's enormous, and the metadata landscape is extraordinarily poor. So this means that it takes us a long time to discover the data that we want to work with. Okay, and anything that can improve that in terms of building central data catalogs, or building very powerful search capabilities, which can actually work across what is a very poor metadata landscape, helps. Okay, data access is probably our biggest pain point. So to Nicola's point earlier on, in terms of balancing this data governance versus data exploitation, obviously there's a real need within the bank to protect data. And this means that access to data for many of the use cases that I've just talked about is a long and laborious task, because you need to get access approval from all sorts of control functions, from your business information security officer, your data protection officer, the data owners, and each one of these can take weeks, months. Now, some of the things that we're really excited about are things like synthetic data. So we've just recently ran a number of pilots with synthetic data. And one of the challenges at the beginning was that sure, you can synthesize data, but it loses a lot of its analytic utility. But the most recent startups in this space managed to be able to generate synthetic data that maintain the data distributions, the analytic utility of the underlying data. And this allows us to actually build our ML models on synthetic data, at least initially, so we can prove or disprove without having to go through the whole data access control area. I'll just quickly moving across data preparation. One of the really big things here then is you've got access to your data. Suddenly you look at your data, it's 1,000 table data warehouse, with very, very little metadata. And you're asking the question, well, how do I stitch this data together? What's the quality of the data? And nobody knows, because again, the metadata is so poor. So what we're looking at here are advanced data profiling tools, which allow us to avoid having to go searching for the original data architects to actually understand the underlying data. And as we move right, then the problems frankly get less as we move right. We spend most of our time in the first three areas. As we move right, the tooling isn't so bad. Maybe the big area that we have a focus on, again, as Nicola brought up, is around trustworthy AI. So as a bank, there's a very low risk appetite around anything that might expose us. So what we find is, bias measurement, bias intervention, the fairness of models, explainability of models, extraordinarily important. And again, this is a new area. It's an area that doesn't have very strong tooling. And again, as Nicola said, it's an area that there isn't great certainty in relation to what are the rules. So as an organization like DB, we're globally regulated. And what we find is that different regulators have completely different perspectives on trustworthy AI. And we need to work with the lowest common denominator, generally speaking. So any support that's available in, again, allowing us to, deal with explainability, trustworthiness, fairness of our AI models is very important, particularly models that are customer facing. So that's probably, I'll just finish with, in terms of going live is a challenge because, AI models are not standard software. They degrade over time. So what's important for us is that, the panacea here would be that we have autonomic models, basically models that recognize that their performance is going below certain thresholds, that swap themselves out for alternative, better performing models. And we do have that in place right now, but we tend to have to build all that scaffolding on a project by project basis. And of course, that adds to the effort and time to put these things into production. So yeah, hopefully that's helped in terms of a whistle-stop tour through AI ML in a bigger organization.
Well, Ray, thanks very much for that. And yeah, certainly some whistle-top tour through. I suspect that we could have a deep conversation on each of those individual pain points that you just had on your second slide. But I suppose the sort of takeaway from there really is when you look at the complexity sometimes around AI and really the opportunity to stand back before you jump into the whole AI process and really ask the right questions. What is it that you're trying to solve? What are the pain points that you've looked at there, and what do you need to do to go through that process? And the whole idea of stage-gating it from idea to validation to going live at the front end, really needs to be thought out, especially when you talk about 8 to 9 months from, I suppose, data discovery right through to perhaps going live on a particular project. So a lot there that we could pick up on later on the conversation. And certainly it leads in quite nicely to our next presenter, Robert Ross, who is familiar in a lot of ways to those particular pain points working on industry research collaborations. Rob, if I hand over to you.
Sure, Edmund. I just want to double check I'm sharing correctly with you. Are you seeing my screen, Edmund?
That's okay, yep, all good.
Yep. Perfect, thank you very much. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and many thanks for the introduction, Edmund. So as Nicola and Ray have highlighted, the growth drivers for fintech have been very significant for a number of years now. The impact of growth is now filtering obviously down into people's daily lives, either in terms of daily financial transactions, but also in terms of the transparency of that relationship between the customers and the financial institutions that are serving them. And as we will see, this is now meaning that there is a lot more attention being paid to the use of technology in the financial services sector than ever before. So with this in mind, today, I'd like to give you a brief overview of what our fintech activities are here in Adapt, and also show how we work with others to use technology to drive innovation and also increase transparency and governance in financial services and applications. So modern day fintech, financial technology, arguably began with the revolution in data analytics that we saw some 10 years ago. It was during that time we realized the great potential of applying machine learning and related methods to the big data, if we remember that term, that we were beginning to gather about our own business processes and customers. So the analytics techniques we talked about then 10 years ago are still to a great extent the bread and butter techniques that underpin much of the work currently being done in the fintech sector. So propensity modeling, outlier detection, segmentation, for example, they are the techniques that opened up the door for many of the innovations we're seeing in insurance, banking, and payment sectors. But once that door was opened and the potential of these and other methods were identified by industry, and they were applied much more broadly and much more and very deep in terms of the types of data that they looked at. As the application of these more advanced methods has gone broader and deeper, we're also now seeing what I think is an inevitable pushback that has led to other forms of innovation that we've had to look at. On one hand, there's been a need for governance, policy, and also explainability. And it's now essential within the enterprise, as Ray has identified. AI policy, as Nicola mentioned, is coming at a European level, and we need to be prepared for the impact of these policy changes. We also need to be in a better position to offer explanations of why our decision processes are making the decisions that they are. And importantly, we increasingly need to ensure that we are not incorporating unfair biases into our models and decision processes. On the other hand, we want to ensure the privacy of data. Anonymization, pseudo-anonymization, and synthesis of data, as noted by Ray, are particularly important techniques here. And again, here, it's not only due to the desire to be good citizens that we have to do this, but we also have to recognize the legislative requirements are, for good or bad reasons, only going to become stronger over time. So in terms of apologies. So in terms of Adapt's work in fintech and the related areas, we're seeing these drivers of data analytics, machine learning, and we want to be able to help financial technology sector by building on our own core competences in data analytics, machine learning, and so forth, but also in state-of-the-art financial technology. To date, we've focused on a number of different areas within financial technology. These disciplines include RegTech, InsurTech, and PayTech, but financial services and FinTech specifically are, of course, very broad, and we see great growth potential amongst other areas such as technology for lending and wealth management. But regardless of the specific fintech branch that we're interested in, I'd argue that our core competences in data analytics and machine learning and others underpin a lot of the work that needs to be done in the financial technology sector. Two of our most core competences I feel are very well aligned with what fintech requires. Here, for example, in machine learning, data analytics, and natural language processing, we have some great skills which we've put to work across a range of different application areas, not only focusing on typical classical numeric data, which is common in fintech, but also the range of multimodal data sources that are increasingly feeding into various types of decision support systems. Deep learning, of course, dominates all of these domains, But as noted by Ray, some of the challenges that we see here are in terms of the scalability of these models and management of concept drift and bias in the modeling. A second key competency in ADAPT relevant to fintech is around governance, compliance, and related themes such as privacy. Here we work on data governance considerations at a European level, and importantly, we try to consider the challenges of governance not only in the fintech space, but in related fields such as health and other broader sectors of IoT or Internet of Things, where obviously data collection, mass data collection and deployment of sensors in public are far from being uncontroversial. Beyond those two core competencies, there are a number of other technology branches that we are really seeing continued growth potential for in the fintech domain. To take a few examples, conversational systems are growing rapidly in the fintech space, not only in terms of providing the low-hanging fruit of customer service agents, but also delivering collaborative assistance that can offer contractors and agents within a company with advice and different points of view on be it modeling processes or points of risk within an organization. We've also seen a lot of interest in behavior and process modeling methods. They're particularly keen whenever we have that job of looking at the operational flow of an organization, modeling it, synthesizing it, and trying to ask questions about whether there are ways in which we can optimize those business processes and perform what if type analysis on if we make changes within an organization. Other types of research, for example, might consider is in personalization. Personalization is not just something that's relevant to choosing a movie, for example. Automated personalizations allow new applications and services to be tailored to the specific needs of customers and clients that we work with. So again, these are all technologies that we see as being very relevant to fintech as it continues to develop in Ireland. So fintech is an important brand and focus for us here in ADAPT, and we have a pipeline of partners in the area. And these partners are obviously national and international in scope. Some project areas that we have worked on include those in risk modeling, price elasticity, portfolio management, insurance claim adjustment, to name but a few. So to expand on this, let me briefly go through 4 quick projects that we have worked through. So linking back with Ray, an early project we did in Deutsche Bank developed machine learning driven solutions to help generate new insights on technologies and trends. This work was deployed internally, providing a 3-to-1 return on investment for the business unit. We've also run a number of projects with Fidelity Investments, I should say. One such project looked at the dividend modeling task with a view to enhancing regulatory compliance. Meanwhile, with Munich Re, we've put our expertise in advanced machine learning and natural language processing to work in order to automate aspects of the underwriting process. Our projects, of course, are more diverse in nature than that. So, for example, another project we conducted with a multinational fintech software firm I can't name here was associated with developing new analytics methods that basically allowed us to analyze absenteeism in the workforce for them. So the breadth of projects that we were involved with in the fintech space reflects the breadth of expertise that ADAPT really has and can draw upon. So as will be mentioned earlier, our team of senior academic researchers span 4 different universities with multiple disciplines being covered, ranging from artificial intelligence, finance, governance, and the broader ICT. Notable names to call out here related to the core competencies I mentioned include somebody like Professor John Kelleher in the machine learning and natural language processing space, and Professor Dave Lewis in the data governance space. Both of these and many others would be considered international leaders in their field. So before finishing up, I wanted to highlight what we see as some of the key challenges in the fintech space. And these have been touched on already by Ray and Nicola to different levels. So at one level, there is, of course, operational challenges. And here, the data and system security are, of course, the most obvious. But integration with AI technology, distributed ledger technology, and others are providing real challenges for R&D and engineering teams across the workspace. At the level of modeling, of course, there's the issues I've already touched on, such as explainability, scalability, bias, and the need for personalization. These are all having an impact on how we apply analytics and machine learning and put them to work in real-time environments. At the top level, though, we also have the issues of governance and privacy. And of course, these aren't just administrative concerns. These are having very real impact and are feeding down into how we both perform modeling and put analytics methods to work. So with that in mind, I think I'll finish up there, just noting that, these sorts of challenges are really exciting for us, and we're really looking forward to, over the course of ADAPT, to work with a number of different companies in this domain. So with that in mind, I will hand back to Edmund and just leave this quote on screen for you.
That's great, Rob. Thanks very much for that. And again, a lot in it. So a lot of those points. I think we need another hour. I don't think we're going to cover a lot of this in 10 or 15 minutes for sure. But some great insights across all three presentations. Listen, if I was to start just as a quick fire question, certainly, and it was a point that was alluded to Nicola in her first presentation, that fintech is one of those sectors that has remained relatively resilient during the COVID pandemic. And in fact, some US fintech companies with European offices have continued to expand and grow their European footprint. So have you seen a shift in the thought process at executive level, or the way companies are innovating within your own company, for example? Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, as we're now beginning to move out of that sort of and moving into the next phase, have you seen a shift in emphasis, Nicola?
I suppose, in terms of industries, financial services was some aspects of financial services. There was a laggard mentality in terms of, getting on the cloud, and there's obvious reasons for that. I think the biggest change that we've seen since the onset of COVID is around the acceleration of digital transformation projects within the industry. So I think, there's many reasons for that. Maybe working from home has given people the additional headspace to have a think about, these large sort of projects. But certainly from our perspective, we see that the scale of the projects and the ambition of the projects has been greatly increased since the onset of COVID. So that's actually very welcome. There's a number of things driving that, I suppose, from an operational point of view as well. The sector has remained resilient, but there's always cost savings that can be made. And that's something that they're looking at in terms of RPA and process improvement. And then, there's been very much in the media about cybersecurity and that side of things. So that's been a critical element of the focus. And we can see that in the types of projects that our clients are looking at. JP Morgan made a big investment before Christmas in the cybersecurity area. Another 100 jobs there were announced in State Street, and they're opening a cyber security centre in Kilkenny. So they're some of the trends that we're seeing.
Very good. And Ray, to Deutsche Bank.
Sorry, could you ask a question again?
Well, the same sort of question in terms of, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, in terms of shift of emphasis. Have you seen a different focus or a more expedited sort of process in terms of how you sort of approach innovation within Deutsche Bank now that we're coming out of the pandemic, or is it more of the same?
Well, I don't think the pandemic's had a huge impact, to be honest. Obviously, future of work, in terms of working remotely and onboarding resources externally, all those sort of things have been expedited. So that makes it easier for us to partner, and that's been a really good thing. I think in all the work that we're doing, one of the things that we're recognizing is that unlike telco, in the financial services domain, there isn't a history of collaboration, of working with outside organizations at all. And what we're noticing is actually that there's a general, a significant shift in respect of that. So we're finding that we're collaborating with other financial institutions on things like financial crime, and we're finding it easier to collaborate with research organizations and academia. Some of the blockers to that had to be around being able to share data. So it's very difficult to actually collaborate without sharing data. And again, it's really, really difficult as a regulated entity to share data. But what we've seen enormously in the last year is advances in data privacy preserving technologies. So synthetic data is just one of those. The idea of being able to synthesize data from production data sets and not having any data privacy leakage risks around that. And that really does, it's a game changer in the ability to be able to collaborate safely. And safety is really, really important to us.
Yeah, very good, Ray. And I think, Rob, certainly from our own experience, we've seen like a continuation of that digitization through automation, through ML, but it's probably an increased focus as we're coming out of the COVID pandemic, with companies really focusing and zeroing in on these problem challenges.
Yeah, I personally, I'm seeing it maybe with more of a change in the SME space maybe than the multinational space. Multinationals were already clearly on the path, but where the SMEs have truly seen many of the advantages of switching towards online for not just day-to-day operations, but transferring a lot of, as mentioned about Deutsche Bank there, for example, starting to look to the cloud providers for a lot of the infrastructure and the AI technology that they've previously tried to roll their own on. So I do think just the idea of working remotely has allowed people to open up to many of those technologies that previously they were a little bit more closed to. So I think that's been a big driver.
Yeah, very good. Listen, at this stage, I just want to pick up on some of the questions that have been raised on the floor and flagged in advance, just to cover those off. We have a good number of questions coming through. We don't have time for all of them, but we will pick up and answer some of these questions by way of follow-up for those that we don't get to. But certainly, Nicola, to you, actually, your talk, to one of the questions, your talk focused on some of the unique strengths of the financial services ecosystem in Ireland, and particularly on the importance of collaboration between academia and industry. And I wonder if there were similar examples of where companies are collaborating, to address shared pain points in the financial services industry, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I suppose this actually links in what Ray said as well. Just on, we are seeing an increase in collaboration across client companies as well. And there's the much publicized, I suppose, Project Pegasus that the Banking and Payments Federation are leading on with some of the domestic banks around an instant payment app that will rival Revolut. So you see a lot of examples like that where companies are able to collaborate on non-competitive areas. There's another nice project, one of my favorites, Project Emerald, led by Canada Life, which is looking at a credential exchange using DLT blockchain technology. So this will, allow the average punter like ourselves, if we're signing up for a new ESB account, you don't have to go through that validation process where it's proof of address, proof of identity. That's already validated on the blockchain, and then you can choose to share that with the company. And then a final one that comes to mind is an initiative initially driven by Stripe, actually, where I think there's about 35 companies at this stage that are working together on developing a new master's level computer science course at the University of Limerick called the Immersive Software Engineering program. And this looks at, I suppose, increasing the supply of talent in software engineering and also helping to attract the best and brightest. So typically the people that might think about medicine or law are very high points academic careers. That they might think about computer science as a way to as a career option. So that program differs from other computer science courses in that it's very focused on residencies. So these students will be able to go into companies and work with them for like 6 months during their undergrad program. And yeah, that's an initiative that has been led by financial services and technology companies in Ireland, and it shows, I suppose, that there's that flexibility with the university sector also to work with companies to develop new courses like that.
Well, that's great, Nicola. Thanks very much for that. And just running through a few other questions quickly, as I think we're moving up to the hour mark. But a question to you, Ray, from Fintan O'Malley. Very interesting, Ray. You seem to have a very skilled team here in Dublin. How do you decide what projects to work on with the centres? And also, second part of that question is, have you engagement from the international Deutsche Bank teams in these collaborations?
Yeah, so it is a good question. And, clearly, it's true, the team are, active researchers, frankly, so they tend to be capable really of doing a lot of the work that we might look to partner with academia on. What we tend to try to do with academia is look from the disruptive sense, basically. So looking out a little further out, so to speak. If you look at something like quantum computing, something Nicola mentioned, we're pretty sure it's not ready for prime time right now. And in fact, what we should be doing is focusing on, GPUs and DPUs and those types of things. But still, we need to keep a watching brief. We need to understand, what use cases is it likely to be most applicable to, and importantly, when is it likely to be impactful for financial services in general? So we wouldn't be really of a mind to set our people on that work, so to speak, but it would be something that we would look to work with external organizations that or academic organizations to show us the path, basically, to give us the reality in terms of where these things are happening. How we do that, frankly, is we do engage with the wider organization, as a function. We're a central function, a horizontal function across the entire organization. So our input to that would be to connect with, the quant part of the organization, the risk assessment part of the organization, get the use cases from them, basically, so that we can then, in a sense, frame our discussion around quantum, let's say, in terms of DB use cases, and understand then, that would be our input to the types of collaborations that we do, and we'd expect then to receive back, as I say, information in terms of the reality of a lot of this, let's say, longer term emerging technology that we need to be tracking.
Great, thanks for that, Ray. And actually, a question probably for Rob. Question from Jacinta in terms of talking about early stage startups. How can early stage startups become involved in the collaboration process, both with either corporations or indeed within academic institutions such as the ADAPT Centre?
Yeah, well, okay. Well, if you take any of the universities, tend to have specialist units that are very good at directing early stage startups towards the research bodies like ourselves in ADAPT. And even within ADAPT, we have Conor McNally and other people who work within the ADAPT Centre, really focused on early stage innovators and who have a very good view on what sort of funding instruments or what sort of opportunities for collaboration might be there. Now, depending on the research institute and depending on the source of funding that the early stage startup has, different instruments can be in play, some of them being quite small, some of them being much larger. So what I would say is reach out to the ADAPT team, obviously, primarily here, but obviously beyond that, even in any of the universities, there are specialist incubator and innovation teams that are there to link you in to us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think our position is that, we do collaborate with startups and we have a strong sort of startup ecosystem. So it's just a matter of reaching out to us directly, and they do collaborate in with in SMEs and multinational companies. And we all start with just problem statement. What are you trying to solve? And just build on that and look at the various technologies that align to those sort of needs and then match the experts accordingly. I'd love to stay on for another 10, 15 minutes because we have a whole host of other questions, but unfortunately we are coming up to the hour and we have promised we'd keep this within the hour. So listen, just to wrap this up with the last few thoughts, I hope you've enjoyed the thoughts of our panelists today. I thought the presentations were fascinating. There's so much detail in there. We could easily follow up on those particular points within those sort of sessions. The presentations will be shared later over the next couple of days, but of course you can also find those webinar videos on our website at adaptcenter.ie, and also various respective fintech use case studies, and much of the broader research work that we're doing within the ADAPT is also available on the adaptcenter.ie website. Next up, this is the fourth in the latest of our webinars. So next up on Creating Tomorrow's webinar is in October, and that's going to be a focus on human-computer interaction, which is a fascinating topic. We've seen huge growth in the use of voice assistants like Amazon and Alexa and Google Home in the past decade. So we'll be chatting about how we engage with those devices and look at the various sort of interactions and research around that sort of space. So much to look forward to. So be sure to follow our social media feeds for news on dates and times of that upcoming webinar. But for now, I just want to thank my ADAPT colleagues for organizing this webinar, to Nicola, Ray, and Rob for their great insights and for their time, and for you, the audience, for giving up your time to tune in. With that, thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next webinar.